Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. As we said earlier, the whole subject of anti-Semitism is just across the news, and primarily here in the United States, showing up in some of these universities. And it's just amazing. You just kind of put your brain on tilt. What's this all about? Well, I am always honored when we have time to sit down with Robert Spencer. He's the director of Jihad Watch, and he's a Shulman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. He's also the author of best-selling books such as The History of Jihad, The Palestinian Delusion, and Did Muhammad Exist? This is kind of like his last book. Oh, no, excuse me. His latest book is Antisemitism, History and Myth. There it is right there. There's the picture of that book. Robert does have a website, jihadwatch.org, jihadwatch.org. And there's the picture of the landing page. Robert, friend, always good to see you. How are you?
Just great, Perry. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. We value it greatly. I want to play a clip for you to kind of maybe set up a little conversation. I don't know if you saw this while you were waiting, but I had Kenneth Abramowitz on. I don't know if you know much about him. He's quite the historian. And I did ask him the question, why does CRT exclude anti-Semitism? And he said, well, you need to know the history of anti-Semitism. So let me play this clip, and I think it sets our conversation up. So hope you had your coffee. Take a look.
Anti-Semitism is a disease, and it's been a disease of 3,800 years. I have an expression, show me the first Semite, and I'll show you the first anti-Semite. So Judaism's been around for 3,800 years and with Abraham. And then about 500 years later, roughly 3,300 years ago, the Torah, the Old Testament, was delivered to the Jews and summarized in the Ten Commandments. So the Ten Commandments is like the Cliff Notes of Judaism, and adopted by Christians. So the Cliff Notes of Judeo-Christian society and philosophy is the Ten Commandments. Well, the Ten Commandments are basically a rule book. And at that time, the world was run by criminals, by pagans who didn't believe in one God. They believed in multiple gods, and they had no firm distinction between right and wrong. And so the Jews basically delivered a rule book. So can you imagine, pretend that you lived in biblical times, and every city, state, and country was run by a criminal organization, and you walk into the mayor or the governor or the king's office and say, Mr. Leading Official of our state, I want to show you the rule book. And the king says, and who are you? I mean, I'm the king. I write the rules, and I'm God, by the way, too. God sent me to be the king. And you show up with the Ten Commandments, and you tell me I'm supposed to read them and listen to them and abide by them? I don't think so. Get out of my office, or let me kill you, because I do not want your laws. And that's the beginning of anti-Semitism.
What do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot to what he says, absolutely, that it's certainly something that has always bothered the conscience of the world, that the Jews even exist. And it's interesting to note that some of the earliest manifestations of anti-Semitism, as I explain in the book, come from ancient Greeks before Christianity, who made up the idea that the Jews had secret practices that they had in the Holy of Holies, where the presence of God is. They actually had a donkey's head and all these things that had no basis in actual Jewish belief or practice. But it seemed to me that they were designed to undermine the Jews' universal claim to say that the one true God has spoken, and this is what the one true God has said, and that pertains to everyone, Jewish or non-Jewish. That is one of the big reasons why the Jews are so hated around the world to this day.
I want to also, before we slip away too far here, is I want to come back to something that was big in the news for a day. It's gone now, and that is the killing of that beautiful couple there at the Capitol Jewish Museum. And it echoed clear across the country and around the world, but you don't see much of it now. But who is Mr. Rodriguez? Who is the guy that did the shooting? Do you know?
Yeah, Perry, I know a little bit about him, and it's fascinating because this guy, he screams free Palestine after he murders two Israelis outside the Jewish Museum in Washington. And he's not Palestinian, he's not an Arab, he's not a Muslim. What he is a Marxist. He's a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And actually, what I show in the anti-Semitism book is that one of the chief sources, the four chief sources of anti-Semitism historically, are Christianity, which is unique in having rejected anti-Semitism, as well as Islam, National Socialism, Nazism, and International Socialism. And international socialism, I think, is very much misunderstood and overlooked as a source for anti-Semitism. But Elias Rodriguez actually embodies the idea that the international socialists are collectivists. They want everybody to be the same in their mega socialist state. And so they want to destroy national borders. That's why the Biden administration, under the control of socialist internationalists, opened the southern border. And so they hate Israel because Israel is a particular state for a particular people. And that's completely against the collectivist idolatry of the socialist internationalists. And that's what Elias Rodriguez was working, the assumptions he was working from when he murdered this couple.
Is it true that he was radicalized at Chicago University?
Yes, seems like it. And of course, that's no surprise because the universities all over the country now are not really institutions of higher learning at all anymore, but just centers of hard left indoctrination. Elias Rodriguez is Exhibit A.
Okay. So anti-Semitism now is just front and center, right in front of us. It's in our face all over the place. How are other countries and world leaders handling this?
Well, they're in total denial for the most part and completely cowardly about it. It's really terrible what's going on. You take, for example, in Britain, it's just ridiculous. It could not possibly be parodied. There was a Jewish demonstrator, a counter protester at a pro-Hamas rally, and he was holding up a poster making fun of Hezbollah and showing the late leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, with his pager going off and beeping. And of course, this was a reference to Israel's famous operation taking out hundreds of Hezbollah operatives by exploding their pagers. And for making fun of Hezbollah in this way, this Jewish protester was actually arrested, while guys that are out there screaming that for the destruction of Israel and a new genocide of the Jews, the British police just passed them by.
Whoa. Okay, we could camp there all day, but I want to go on. You published an article, I think just yesterday, about Tommy Robertson there in the UK and the interesting connection with Elon Musk. Update us on that one, Robert.
Yeah, Tommy really is a martyr for the freedom of speech in the UK, which is on its last legs. Britain is in, and it's no exaggeration, Perry, it's in its last days as a free society, if it can even be called a free society at all. Tommy has been singular in calling attention to the Muslim rape gang activity, which has been rampant. Hundreds of thousands, no exaggeration, hundreds of thousands of British girls have been victimized and their lives destroyed by these gangs. And the British authorities looked the other way because they didn't want to be called racist and Islamophobic. Tommy was virtually alone in calling attention to that. For that, he's been hounded and persecuted by the British government. He was just released yesterday, but he's going to go back to court next week. Once again, he's been consistently jailed for things that other people would get light sentences or no sentences at all for. It's very clear that the British government wants to destroy him. They want to make an example of him for calling attention to these things that they'd rather sweep under the rug.
So what's the connection to Elon?
Elon called attention to the Muslim rape gang activity when the British government was looking the other way, as they did for years on end. And Elon made it into a big international issue for the very first time and forced the British government to reopen some old inquiries that had been closed and to start some new ones to try to come to some honest resolution about all this. And so Tommy publicly thanked Elon Musk yesterday for doing all this, because it also brought attention to how the British government has been hounding and persecuting him for being the guy standing out and talking about these issues.
Wow. Do you think Parliament, Robert, can survive by allowing the coexistence of pockets of Sharia law?
There's no way. Britain cannot stand, just as Abraham Lincoln said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And of course, he was quoting the Bible, quoting the Lord's words, but he was referring to the split in the United States between the North and the South at the time he was president. And it's the same thing in Britain. You can't have two parallel societies, two parallel laws, not a single rule for the whole people. This is actually a foundational lesson that the British taught us. It was the Magna Carta in the year 1215, signed by King John of England, that ended the practice of having the nobles have one law and they were free from other laws that the commoners had to follow. There was going to be henceforth one law for all people. Now Britain is retreating from that. That's the very basis of what makes for a free society, that you don't have special classes that have special laws that other people that don't apply to other people. And so Britain is now retreating from what made it one of the leading lights and pioneers of free societies in the world.
Do you think the average Brit understands this?
No, because they're miseducated. They're told all the time that it's racist and Islamophobic to question these things. So most of them are completely complacent about what's going on or intimidated into silence.
What about France? Are they in the same trouble?
Yeah, France is very much in the same boat. Macron, as a matter of fact, the president of France, was just handed the other day a report about Muslim Brotherhood activity and infiltration in France, and he immediately downplayed it and said, let's not be hysterical here. This is an exaggeration, because he needs the Muslim vote. And indeed, he would not have been elected president the last time if it hadn't been for the Muslim vote. But the problem is that the Muslim vote and Macron are in favor of open borders, of bringing in large numbers of Muslims. It's not that Muslims are bad people or something like that, but when you have people who believe in Islamic law and think that it's the only legitimate law and that it's superior to the law of the land, that's just a recipe for societal upheaval. And that's what France is bringing upon itself, as well as Britain.
I just don't think we in the West understand that conviction and that position in life, that when you're dealing with a monarchy versus what we have over here, a republic democracy, we can't wrap our head around the fact that one ideology rules everything.
That's right. And so we have no idea really of the threat of Sharia, because it is all-encompassing and it covers every aspect of life. But probably if people have heard of it at all in the United States, they think of it as Islamic religious law, like Catholic canon law for marriages and things like that, that don't apply to people outside the faith. And yet Sharia does pertain to non-Muslims and actually mandates their second-class status in a society ruled by the hegemony of Islamic law. So this is something that would destroy America as a free society, as it is already in the process of destroying Britain, France, Germany, and Sweden.
One more quick question, Robert, before I take a break. With all of the controversy and the fanning of the flame of anti-Semitism on college campuses, are these pristine universities going to survive this?
Well, ultimately not. Ultimately there's no way that they can sustain it. But the fall will not come for a while, because even if Trump succeeds in cutting off the federal funding and some judge doesn't reverse it all, as is likely to happen, then they've got billions of dollars in endowments, most American universities today. So they can survive for quite a long time while continuing to be the radioactive centers of leftist indoctrination that they are today.
All right. Let me take a quick break. Check out Robert's website, jihadwatch.org. Support his organization, jihadwatch.org. Check out his latest book, Antisemitism, History and Myth. Right there is a picture of the cover of the book. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. Always an honor to have with us Robert Spencer. He's the director of Jihad Watch. He's authored quite a few books. His latest one I think you'll find to be a fascinating read, and it helps us with what we're dealing with in our culture today. Antisemitism, History and Myth. There's a picture of the cover of the book on the screen. He does have a website. It's very active, and let me encourage you to go there and support him, jihadwatch.org, and there's the picture of the landing page there. Okay, Robert, through the break, I was trying to figure out how do I diplomatically ask a tough question? And I found out there is no way. So I'll just come right out and say, ask the question. Has Christianity contributed to the spread of anti-Semitism?
Yeah, you know, Perry, as a Christian, I'm sorry to say this myself, but we have to be honest about it. The fact is that it was a chief source of anti-Semitism for many centuries, but Christianity, as I mentioned before, is the only major source of anti-Semitism historically where the principal Christian leaders, the leaders of the major denominations, have actually rejected it. There's no Islamic leaders who've rejected Islamic anti-Semitism. Nazism is still Nazism. International socialism is much more anti-Semitic than most people realize. But Christianity, it's rejected. So that's the first thing that we need to bear in mind. But the fact is that throughout history, there have been Jews who have been brutalized, victimized, even killed because of the Christians' idea, many Christians' idea, that they were uniquely responsible for the death of the Lord. And this, of course, comes from a reading of the Passion narratives that places the blame on the Jews, zeroes in on the statement in Matthew about the Jews in the audience as Pilate is talking to them, saying, "His blood be upon us and upon our children," and so on. And the thing is, though, I think that even though it became very common in Christian Europe, unfortunately, to say that the Jews were the killers of Christ, it's based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the faith. Because after all, you and I would both say that if somebody asked us, who put Christ on the cross? Why did Jesus die on the cross? I'd say, because of my sin. It was my fault. I did it. Every human being did it. We are all responsible because he was on the cross in order to redeem us from our sins. And so that seems to me to be completely contradictory to the idea that the Jews did it, because if it's the fault of the Jews and it's this terrible thing that happened, then how is it that everyone's sin put him on the cross? It's either the Jews or everyone. And so if we're going to talk about his universal salvific act in bearing our sins upon the cross, then that in itself cancels out the possibility of saying the Jews are responsible. And so it seems to me Christian anti-Semitism is fundamentally incoherent and contradictory to the basic tenets of the faith across all the denominations and sects. And that's why it's been rejected.
That's probably one of the best explanations I've ever heard, Robert, because you just knocked in the head Reconstructionism.
Well, that's the whole idea, yeah. If we have these kinds of theological concepts within Christianity, then we have to recognize that they're not compatible with the universal redemption. And so that's the end of Christianity altogether.
So why isn't there more of a genuine expression to Jews from major denominations, i.e. the Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church?
Well, the Catholic Church actually, for all the disagreements that we may have with it, they actually led the way on this in the 1960s with a declaration. And it wasn't the first time, as a matter of fact. As I show in the book, It's very famous that at the Second Vatican Council in the 1960s, the Catholic Church officially rejected the idea that the Jews have unique responsibility for putting the Lord on the cross. But this was actually something that they were repeating from the Council of Trent in the middle of the 1500s, and yet even after the Council of Trent, there were many Catholics who continued to repeat this. We have to acknowledge that after the Second Vatican Council, that has been much less true, and that Christian anti-Semitism has considerably receded and declined in the last part of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st, at least until the advent of all this new anti-Semitism from the likes of Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and such.
Wow. Building upon your knowledge there, let me step into the spiritual just for a moment. We see something very spiritual happening with Israel. It's being attacked from all sides. Its only strong ally is us right now, the United States. There seems to be some daylight appearing between Trump and Netanyahu, or that could be just response from the media. What's your assessment today?
Well, you know, Perry, I always have Ezekiel 38 in the back of my mind, and the idea that there will be an eschatological moment when Israel is completely isolated. And, you know, we all saw that coming down the road fast during the Biden administration and thought that now it will recede a little bit during Trump's period in office. And now Trump, for whatever reason, is also distancing himself from Israel. Now, I did see yesterday him speaking, and he did seem to be contradicting some of the more lurid media reports, saying that the order or the request to Netanyahu not to attack Iran right now was just a tactical thing and a temporary delay in light of the ongoing negotiations. And it was not some turning against Israel. And so that was encouraging to see. But I am afraid that it is going to work out that way ultimately. But this, of course, will be in the Lord's time, and it will be a difficult period. But in the end, of course, we know that the good will triumph.
So, is this delay really ongoing negotiation, or could it possibly be internal preparation?
It could be. I mean, after all, the cozying up to Qatar is a very bad sign. It seems like Trump, just a few years ago, he said Qatar is a chief terror state. It's a dangerous state. And now he seems to have forgotten all about that. And suddenly we're pals and making all these deals with Qatar. Well, what happened to the fact that they had the Hamas guys there on October 7th celebrating the attacks, and that they're still sheltering some of the surviving Hamas leaders? Why isn't Trump saying anything about that? It remains disquieting, and I'm hoping that ultimately it will be sorted out, and the president will make abundantly clear that he is not retreating from the U.S. alliance with Israel. Right now, it's not entirely clear.
Do you think Israel still goes at it alone against Iran? I mean, the clock is no longer ticking. They're at the line, from what I understand. There's no longer time here. It's there.
I think they're going to have to, just like they did with Saddam Hussein's nuclear facilities in Iraq, and there were others, and the world condemned them. But then a few years later came around, and all these heads of state were thanking Israel for taking out this dangerous nuclear program. I suspect that's what we're going to see with Iran as well.
So I'm not trying to be fearful here or warmongering, but it appears to me you got Putin totally out of control there with Ukraine, running the risk of all that diplomacy blowing up. You've got China kind of on bended knee economically, and you got Iran over here with the nuke. If those three band together, we have World War III.
Yeah, well, that's a very real possibility, and it can't be discounted. I don't want to sound all doom and gloom myself, but Perry, we have to face the reality. Iran has been working with Russia for years. China has numerous partners in the Islamic world and would love to get in on the action in that regard. And so it could easily happen. It could all too easily happen. That actually might be one reason why Trump told Netanyahu to hold up. There were some indications that I saw that there were concerns in Washington, in the administration, about this becoming a global conflict, and that could be nuclear Armageddon right there.
At the same time, he's also proven one thing President Trump has, that the power of the tariff, which is really a restriction against these companies, he could increase sanctions of both Russia and China and cripple them economically, which kind of disengages them from the triangle, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's already happening with China. I think that it should happen with Russia. As a matter of fact, yesterday, Putin was saying, hey, you got to remove these sanctions. They're killing us. And I thought, well, you just gave us the indication of what we ought to do next in order to stop your belligerent activities.
Yeah, interesting. Robert, you always give us time. Thank you, brother. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out his latest book, Antisemitism, The History and the Myth. There's the picture of the cover. And check out his website. Support him, jihadwatch.org. Thank you, Robert. God bless you, friend. Stay in the fight.
You too, Perry. Thanks so much.
You bet.